Yeah. Yeah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the first time since late 1998, early January 1999, that I'll be addressing a gathering of this type, not in the capacity of a candidate. However, my commitment to the Barbados Labour Party and to the people of the country by extension is not diminished in any way. And I've come here this afternoon having been allotted just under 30 minutes to speak to you not as a candidate, because I'm not a candidate, but to share some thoughts with you and to plead with you. And I'm going to use a simple theme for my half-hour address of risk-taking with votes and inefficient monitoring by an electorate and the disastrous consequences of taking risks with your future. Yes, the electorate is indeed free to choose which candidate or group of candidates they need. But what has happened to this country in the last 10 years tells me clearly that Barbadians need to raise their level of consciousness and their level of awareness when it comes to political matters to the height that what this country was called upon to endure for the last 10 years as a result of a suspected electorate taking risks. And beyond that, as a result of the electorate not being efficient monitors of those who came to power, largely by false means. Ladies and gentlemen, this country, in my estimation, is on a slippery slope, and it has been for the last 10 years. And there are failures manifested in almost every aspect of human endeavor in Barbados. And it is happening at a scale and with a proportion that tells me, and I'm coming here to plead with you, that do not see this upcoming election as an opportunity just for you to go out because you are accustomed, like me, proudly wearing red shirts, and to return the Barbados Labour Party to power just because we are all supporters of the BLP. I am submitting to you that all of you, including myself, we have a higher commitment to country, and we have a higher duty to cause and purpose, which mandates all of us to go in a way that we have never done before. Not just to ensure that the Democratic Labour Party is gotten rid of, but also to join with the Barbados Labour Party therefrom and ensure that a lot of the wrongs and deception and corruption that these people, criminals as they are, have brought to the political landscape in Barbados and made it a feature of politics in Barbados, that they are brought to justice after the next election. And I'm going to be monitoring things extremely closely. I move around, very active, very community-minded. And persons who I am meeting for the first time, you must believe me when I tell you this, they are not just concerned about the Democratic Labour Party being gotten rid of, but they are concerned that the raping that has been done to the financial purse of this country, that persons who are responsible, that they be brought to justice And that therefrom, that this Barbados Labour Party puts a new governance system and governance arrangements in place to ensure that any person coming to public office in Barbados is assured that mechanisms are in place, easily activated, to ensure that if you come to politics and your hands are not clean and your heart is not pure, that you will be treated in accordance with the law. Ladies and gentlemen, a consequence of risk-taking with votes, a consequence of inefficient monitoring of politicians, especially the incumbent, a consequence or consequences of that is what we are experiencing now. We have a government in place. Bad choices by the electorate. They're free to vote for who they want in the simple majority. But we have a government in place that has distinguished itself in the worst possible way. And the consequences of the way in which they have run the affairs of this country is that innocent Barbadians are made to suffer and suffer and suffer. We have reached a stage in this country now where people who were employed in the civil service for many, many years, they are to pander to the DLP, not because they have engineered and modernized the economy so that the economy can be built out and larger numbers of people get employed in the private sector and in the public sector, but they're to feel comfortable and they're to hold up their hands and shower these criminals with kudos because they maintain a job in the civil service. I have never seen so much madness yet. You have to give somebody thanks for not chasing you away. You give somebody thanks for employing you. You give somebody chance for creating better opportunities for you to express yourself. You give somebody thanks not for cutting the enrollment at the university by instituting a stupid policy, but you're supposed to give them thanks, criminals as they are, for you not being dismissed from the public sector. Ladies and gentlemen, a consequence of inefficient choices is to ensure that persons who are very unworthy, they're submerged to the top. I'm going to be very frank, because I'm frank with everybody. And I can tell you that we have a bunch of corrupt, and I call them criminals. They're also serial liars. And I'm telling you, if you have a bunch of people who are managing the affairs of this country, they're not just grossly incompetent. And I'm not going to come here and give you any fancy speech like what I give my folks at the university. It isn't going to be about economics. It isn't going to be about finance. It is about governance and social justice and the need to bring people to justice for their misdeeds. And I said in Gemsvik last night that if you want to lie and it's going to affect your family and your lackeys, that is good for you and you can deal with that amongst yourselves. But when you manifest your inability to tell the truth and you become a serial liar, and there are numerous examples of these people engaging in acts of serial lying, which redound to the demise of people in the country. And I am very passionate about these things because when you come to office, you present yourself as worthy, knowing very well that you have ulterior motives, then you ought to be dealt with severely. When you come and you tell a lie of the proportion to destroy persons with aspirations lives at the university, persons who were in the system already who had to drop out, good students of mine, and when they had to leave the university for lack of finance to continue, at the hands of these criminals, it brought tears to my eyes. And when you prevent persons from very humble beginnings from aspiring to gain tertiary level education, to educate their families and their communities, and to participate in meaningful ways in building the nation, I think that you have committed such a heinous act that voting you out could not be enough for you. They have to find something else to deal with such persons. And I go further than that. When you can parade yourself all about this country on the eve of the last election, and that is what I say, risk-taking with votes, inefficient monitoring of criminals, this will be the result. I remember warning people up and down across the length and breadth of this country that you cannot trust Frederick Stewart. He was a member of parliament, or he received money as a member of parliament in St. Philip South until I decided to run. And we were so happy to get him out of St. Philip, lazy as he is, don't careish as he is, a symbol of gross incompetence as he is, but worse yet, a serial liar as he is. And he can walk around this country and he can tell people that a vote for the Democratic Labour Party is a vote to secure jobs, to secure public sector jobs. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a lie of such proportion that it has destroyed the aspirations and the livelihood of thousands and thousands of families in this country. Just like the university. And let me give you something about that. These bandits, when they instituted that policy, the enrollment at the university dropped tremendously. And Clyde was throwing around some figures the other night down in Bank Hall. Let's say at the time, 7,000 persons were on the enrollment list at the campus. In short order, that amount dropped to just over 4,000. So to make the calculations easy, if 3,000 people were sent home, and they decided that they're going to pay 80% of the tuition fees of the students. 80% of the tuition fees of 3,000 students. You can work out that. You can work out that. 20% of that per year is $60 million a year. The 20% that they threw on the backs of the students. And would you believe that these incompetent criminals, the $60 million that they would have saved when they caused the enrollment to drop so drastically, increase the level of dislocation, social and economic dislocation for those families, that they would not even pay the university in full for the amount of students that remain on the enrollment list. And that for 5 consecutive years, that these people have been owing the university $200 million. So you can tell me, if the student enrollment drop, if you have this outstanding debt to that of that significance, if you throw $40 million a year on to the students, God would tell me, common sense will tell me in justice and decency, that the 4,000 students who were left in the system, that you can pay for them in full. Because you're not having to pay to 7,000 anymore. But they have found the money to do all sorts of other things besides giving poor black persons like myself an opportunity to study. Let me also tell you a consequence of these inefficient choices and risk-taking with votes. They have allowed in this country, in your name, a reconsolidation of wealth in the hands of a few persons. And what comes along with that is such a disrespect for the law that we have a few persons in this country who feel that they are way above the law. And I tell you, after this election, all of those injustices, social and economic and otherwise, that have been made a part of life in this system, they need to be uncovered, they need to be investigated, and persons need to be placed where they ought to. We have a situation in this country, and I've been the victim of a lot of it when I was a member of parliament. And one of the things that I'm sorry that I have not gotten a chance to do yet is indeed to commit my experience to writing as a politician. But we have in this country all sorts of acts of dishonesty and deception and corruption. And a consequence of risk-taking is that there is a level of institutionalized corruption in Barbados that is of staggering proportions. Staggering proportions. And the idea of consolidating wealth and conferring what we call in public sector economics, economic rents on a few persons. And you know who some of them are. Because their pigmentation not like mine or yours. You know who they are. You know who they are. And if you could assemble and collapse so many contracts in the hands of one company, something must be fishy about that. And all of this is happening on the backs of the 2008 election. I tell you, you have a more serious duty to make sure that these criminals are gotten rid of. It is not just about going out there because you like the Barbados Labour Party. It is your love for your country. And that you're not going to stop at anything whatsoever under God's sun or moon to ensure that these bandits are gotten rid of. Maybe Mr. Arthur called them a bunch of wild boys. You thought he was making sport. But he should have gone a bit further. Because if he had anticipated at the time that they came to politics with such ridiculous intentions, he would have turned them more. And if he had done that, maybe the Barbadian electorate would have stood up and taken greater note and never voted for them in 2008. But we have a situation here where one man, some Maloney or who he is, I obviously have no regard for him. Because people like him, are accomplices in all the majority of this conferment of rents on certain companies in Barbados to the exclusion of those who need it most. And it hurt me one day. I heard this accomplice to some of the worst things happening in Barbados come on a call-in program and say that people in Barbados are coming down too hard on him, that he is a Barbadian too and nobody wants him to live. I mean, when I hear these things, nobody wants him to live, but he used to grab everything aided and abetted and facilitated by these Democratic Labour Party cabinet ministers. But the majority of people in Barbados who've had to fold companies and suffer and suck soul, they don't have to live too. Because he has this God-given right, and others with his pigmentation, they have this God-given right to cream off everything and be facilitated by criminal politicians, whereas the majority of Barbadians are supposed to suffer. But I got news for them. And I hope that before I pass away, that I live to see a Contractor General's office being established in Barbados and taking the award of contracts out the hands of criminal politicians and let it go straight into the Contractor General's office. One who is very impartial, and one whose office gains the respect of all Barbadians, especially those who are concerned about how their taxpayers' money is spent. I'm going to tell you, as part of this forensic investigation that William spoke about, I hope, because there is a shift in the thinking amongst the larger numbers of Barbadians who were unfeared by these criminal members of parliament for the DLP and cabinet ministers, who are now prepared to talk, about who collect what for ZR permits. They're prepared to talk. They feel the Barbados Labour Party will win. They want to support us. And I hope that the legal system in Barbados can be reconfigured and engineered in such a way that those bad and misdeeds, which cause ordinary Barbadians who just looking to make a living and to feed their families, if we had to fork out thousands and thousands of dollars for things that should be given free of cost. I've even heard that this thing now has been extended to other types of permits in Barbados. But you will hear more about it. You will hear more about it. But we also have a situation, you see that digging of the wells that William's speaking about on the South Coast. It is not by accident that these vagabonds waited all of this time and on the eve of an election that they could offer a contract to sink wells 300 feet deep. Not even knowing if that is indeed the concrete solution to the problem. Because common sense will tell me, and good judgment will tell me, that if that was indeed the solution to the problem, it would have been done a long, long, long time ago. So they are indeed speculating with people's health over on the South Coast. But I want you to check who the contract for digging the wells has been awarded to. I want you also to check, while you're doing that, who the contract for the awarding of the Barbados Water Authority headquarters up in the Point, who that was awarded to. I want you also to check the timing at which these two things were awarded relative to the calling of an election. I also want you to check if descending on the constituency for which I ran in the last election, if there's anything common by way of common denominator with the distribution of $50,000, which they said they would not leave a stone unturned to ensure that this person with this brain, with this fearless speech, would not have come back to the House of Assembly. And I also want you to check if the company that is responsible for all of it, if a company on the eve of the last election did not assemble its office staff the day before the last poll to indicate to them, just to drive fear in their heart, that if the Barbados Labour Party is returned to power, I cannot guarantee you, any of you, a job tomorrow. And there is something common in all of it. But you come along and you will hear more. The consequences of risk-taking with your vote and bad choices have caused us to be in this mess. We have a situation, and when you see a prime minister as incompetent as Frendel Stewart is, a prime minister who finds it difficult to tell the truth, the country cannot prosper. But it goes a little further than this. Could you imagine, for all the tea in China and India put together, we have a minister of finance who demonstrates very little competence. To none, really. In matters pertaining to economics and finance. It is as though the country has had to endure punishment, unnecessarily so. It is as though they have a hatred for Barbadians, that Frendel Stewart could keep one of the highest symbols of incompetence at such an important ministry. Now, common sense will tell me, how could a prime minister keep a minister of finance in place who has presided over 23 downgrades in our ratings? That is what you expect. The person who has done that would have to be more foolish than the minister of finance. Because you wouldn't expect nobody in their right mind to do something like that. Yes, I know that he's a slow learner. I know he's a slow thinker. I know Frendel Stewart. I know he's grossly incompetent. And as a result of him being a slow learner and a slow thinker, he must be a slow speaker. Because if you don't think quick, if you don't learn fast, then you have very little to say. So his silence, I understand the rationale for his silence. Because he thinks slow and he learns slower. So he must speak slower. But at least he should have the presence of mind and judgment as a prime minister of any individual in God's world to know that if a man is such a failure, That you do not take an entire nation down the slippery path by keeping him installed. One of the things that we have learned early in the study of the theory of economic policy, that economic policy making is a process of interaction between the policymakers and the private sector. And the policymakers, in order to take the private sector into their confidence, they must establish what we call credibility and reputation in policy making. But how could a man who presided over 23 downgrades, a symbol of the highest level of incompetence in Barbados, urged on by a slow thinker, a slow learner, a disgrace, a national disgrace, a regional disgrace as a prime minister, and he can keep this symbol of incompetence, another serial liar like Chris Sickler, in place, and we have to suffer, as Slide say, on the altar of economic ignorance in the case of Sickler. I mean, something has to be wrong with the thinking of these people. And because poor choices were made, and because we have not been efficiently monitoring this group of bandits, the entire country has had to suffer and continue to suffer. Well, I say to you, you have a duty higher than yourself and higher than this Barbados Labour Party to go there and mobilize as much support as possible, because they are coming with another round of monstrous lies, and they are building up their reserves to unleash it in election campaign in such a way that they have never done before, because they cannot come and bring anything of substance in defense of their stewardship. I want you to be careful. I want you to accept this plea of mine to go and bring them to justice. Make sure you dismiss them. But before I finish, I have to say a word on Ms. Ford. Since he was my parliamentary secretary at the Ministry of Education, you know of her competence as a member of parliament. You know she's one of the most active members of parliament, one of the best loved members of parliament, and Cynthia will do what she has to do. And because she is so well loved and because she treats people so well, she will undoubtedly be returned to power. So I don't want you all give her your support, but don't fear for her. I want you to go elsewhere and get everyone out to ensure that the Barbados Labour Party candidates, wherever they are, that they are successful. We get these bandits out, we bring them to justice, and also we propel Mayor Amar Mortley to the Prime Ministership of this country. I thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Comrade Wood. You were going so well that I really didn't want to stop you. But regrettably, we are constrained by time.